Welcome, everyone, to a special episode of the Real Profit, Real Perspective podcast. We decided, you know what's better than two? Three. Nick has been so kind as to let me be on his YouTube channel, and we thought, you know what, why don't we do the same and bring him on and give him a chance to share his story of what it's been starting his own law firm, what his career has been up to this point, and get some other perspectives than just me and Ryan constantly talking about being CPAs for a while. We thought, let's bring in another licensed professional here to get their story on what's been going on. So, Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm good, guys, and I appreciate y'all having me on. Yeah, everything's been going pretty well. A little bit hectic getting back in the office from being off on Friday, but I think I got everything good handle on it. So,
I mean, hey, any Friday that you can take the day off and things don't implode, I mean, that's a good day in my book.
oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So, obviously, I know you really well. We've worked together a whole lot. But for everybody else who doesn't know you, Nick, who are you and what do you do?
So my name is Nick Dogle, and I started my law firm, North State Law, in 2019. So when I started, my main focus practice area, whichever nomenclature you prefer, has been professional licensing, typically on the professional license defense side. So we were talking about this before we press record, but obviously, Connor, you got a licensed CPA. Ryan, you said you're a licensed CPA, and you also have your 65 as under FINRA license as well. I mean, I've got a license to practice law, and sometimes people do something that is alleged to be a violation. Sometimes it's a legitimate allegation. Sometimes it's not. But if they want to protect that license and either contest the facts or try to get maybe a lesser penalty, if they can't avoid a penalty, then they call us and we help them out. We've started doing license acquisition in certain professions as well, where people can focus on, like for example, if you're a GC, you don't have to have a license as long as the work and materials and labor is under $40,000. So if you want to focus on just doing that and you want us to handle all the application side and get everything squared away as much as we can help you out on that. Same with a couple other professions as well. And we're going to slowly start expanding that out a little bit more and more as time goes by.
Nice. How'd you get into doing all this stuff? I think that's actually something I don't know if we've gone into a whole lot of detail, which I didn't realize that you've actually been with North State as long as I've been in business in total, because I think I got started, was it November 2019? So how did you get into this whole thing? So before North State, what'd you do?
So I started practicing law in 2008 at a public defender's office in Harrison County, Mississippi, doing nothing but felonies. So I got tired of doing that after about almost 3 years. Got tired of living in Mississippi after about seven. And it's like a lot of great people there, but there's really not a whole heck of a lot going on. You know what I mean? So I moved up here, and then I had a couple of jobs working for different firms, some small, one big, and then I worked for a really small firm. They were downsizing. I got let go in February 2019, and then they ended up closing up shop that October. So I had seen the writing on the wall, and I was already kind of setting up to kind of do my own thing. And that just kind of like accelerated the process, you know what I mean? So I had my laptop. I had gotten work. I was working on the name, and then I had the practice area from like walking. I was just having a walk with my wife. And I was like, I've defended people before. I had a couple nursing cases, and then I also had like a GC case, and I think I had one other one. And I was like, yeah, I really like that. That kind of goes with my natural healthy distrust for government interference and people just trying to have, live their life and do what they want to do. And so I was like, that's what I'm going to do with my firm. I'm going to start advertising that way and so on and so forth. And I lucked out big time because I had a friend of mine that I kind of took the reins of the Wake County Bar Association's softball league from her. Her name's Jenny Bradley, Triangle Smart Divorce. So shout out to Jenny. And she just kind of called me out of the blue and was like, hey, how are things going? I'm like, you know what, Jenny, they could be going a little bit better. So she ended up letting me sublease office space from her for a couple of years, just about, until she was like, hey, I need that office. So you got about 2 months before you find some other place. I was like, all right, cool. So I ended up finding my own office and kind of been growing from there. But yeah, that's kind of how everything got started, and just been expanding. I acquired the downstairs of my unit beginning of July. So getting a little bit more space here and there as needed.
That's so interesting, man. And to go back to what you were saying, so it sounds like you were both kind of already thinking about starting your own shop, but you were also kind of thrust into it.
Yeah.
How was that? Like,
Yeah, so my timeline was like August of 2019, and so I got let go like right around the middle of February of 2019, and I was like, well, I left with like a handful of clients, because when you're an attorney, you don't, you have to give the client a choice. Like, hey, you either can come with the person leaving the firm, or you can stay with the firm. And my clients, they wanted to stay with me because they had familiarity with me. I was doing a good job on their cases, kind of things like that. There was like one client where we had to appeal to the Court of Appeals, or the other party appealed the decision to the Court of Appeals. That one stayed with the other firm, but the other, I think it was like 9 clients went with me. So I had to open my own trust account, get the money moved over. I didn't have like a ton of startup capital. Like, I had very small amount of startup capital. So that was kind of the one bad thing about my timeline getting pushed, so quickly. I mean, you're talking about 6 months, or kind of shot my whole plan of funding out the window. But I also realized, like, I'm in some I've been in some law firm groups, and I'm currently one on the internet. And from talking with a lot of other attorneys, like, the biggest thing is they just, oh, I'll get to this. I'll open my own firm. I'll do this. And it's like, 3, 4 years, 5 years down the road, they still haven't done anything because they're scared, because it's like me, like, I'm going to be underfunded. I'm not going to have enough money to pull this off, and so on and so forth. But since I got basically thrown into the deep end, I had to make it work. So, I think my kid was not even, like, he wasn't even 2 at the time, my first kid. So I really had to make it work. And I did. I mean, so far, so good. You're never really done, right? So you got your foot on the gas, never mind them brakes. So
It's wild how much I think that mirrors both what me and Ryan have also gone through. The whole, bootstrapped. It's like, what's when they start to have discussions on, on the internet and all that, like, oh, how much, capital do you need to start a business and stuff like that? And it was like, what do you mean capital?
right.
You had resources available. It was like, that was do or die. It was, I got 3 months worth of money. We need to get stuff coming in ASAP. No, that's what was. So what was it? So that period in between, again, this February and then in October, what was that like for you when it, I guess, was that when it really started to sink in how much it was a kind of do or die situation?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably pretty fair around then. And the biggest thing to me, because when I first started, I was like working out of the bonus room above our garage in the house, and I was having to meet people. I wouldn't meet people in public. If it was in public, it was like outside, away from anybody else. Like, so we weren't like, can keep the attorney-client privilege and things like that. Most of the time, people were fine with phone calls. I think that I think I worked out something before I was able to sublease from Jenny's office. I worked something out where I could use a conference room here and there as needed. So that was probably the biggest thing. And I've always been like cost conscious when it comes to a lot of things, like personal finances, professional finances in general. So my like mindset was already keep the cost super low. So I was able to keep my expenses like dirt low. And even when I was subleasing, they're kind enough not to charge me much. And, that really helped. So I've always been looking at trying to kind of like pass that kind of generosity off to other people as well, because somebody was nice to me and helped me out. And really, if it wasn't for them, like, I don't know if it really would have worked, to be honest with you. Like, maybe it would have, but, I do know for a fact that it worked, and that had a lot to do with it if I had to guess. So, but yeah, I mean, The other one, obviously, when you're cutting expenses or keeping your expenses low, that's great. But if you're not making any money, it doesn't matter, you know? I mean, it makes two shit bits of difference. And on the other hand, I had to figure out marketing on the fly, and I don't have a marketing degree. I majored in a language I already spoke at the time, still speak it. It's English. So I had to kind of
You always
learn.
struck me as a French guy.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I had to kind of figure the marketing stuff out. I read some marketing books, and I joined like a business coaching thing that worked for a while until it didn't. But I did learn a good bit of marketing by that. I think the one that I kind of already knew was like Google's king. So you got to figure out as best as you can how to feed the machine, especially organically, and then work on the Google ads. So I was focused on networking initially, and then writing blogs. And back then I had like what was it, as a plugin that tells you how Google likes what you've put out there, like how SEO friendly is your content. So
Like a Yoast or Rank Math type thing?
exactly, I think it was Yoast is what I had, Yoast SEO. And so my goal was always to have green. Well, the frustrating thing about it is like you change one thing and it turns into yellow, and then you're trying to get it to green, and you change something else and then it slips it to red, and then you're like, well, shit. So you get it. I would spend, I'm not kidding, I would spend probably 2 to 3 hours between writing the content and then tinkering with it to get to what Yoast would say Google liked. And I would say 60% of what I had back then was green, and the other 40 was yellowish, maybe 65, 35, something like that. And, some of my older blogs are still like Google organic searches. They're going to be number one. Just because they've been there a while. I talked to a marketing guy last week, and he brought up my stats, and like verification wise for the site, it was like 21, and he was like, "That's actually pretty high for the size of your firm." He's like, "You'll see some of these big firms be at 40," and he goes, "That's because they're pumping 25 grand a month into their advertising." And he's like, "You ended up at 21, and you don't." I was like, "Okay, that's because I took my time." 6 years ago, starting to write these blogs, and it's finally paying off. And it started to pay off a lot sooner than that. And I started to get calls and calls. And then, as you guys know, you start getting calls. Well, I can't sit there and do the legal work and the marketing and then take the sales calls, because that's what they are. It's a consultation, but it's really a sales call. And
Yeah.
I can't do all that stuff myself. So I had to start getting into block scheduling. And then, so the block schedule will be like, all right, well, I got to focus on marketing today, or I got to get legal work done between these 3 hours, and kind of stuff like that. And if somebody wants to set a call, they can talk my answering service or receptionist, and then they can set during these certain time frames. So as I was growing, I was trying to find ways that were cost effective, but they're also not going to upset potential clients or current clients either, because I am client service focused. Like, you got to get the work done, you got to do a good job, but you also have to make sure that the client's happy. Some clients, as you guys know, are never happy, and that's why they don't stay clients for very long if they have that attitude. And we actually have a client grading system, so A through F. And there was a time where I was having to take like some D clients, and then slowly I could drop the D clients. F clients I would never take. Every once in a while, a D client would kind of slip down into an F. But I got to the point where I wouldn't take even D clients, and then I would just A, B, and C. And then I could stop taking C clients, and then I would just keep it A and B. So right now we're still just taking like the A and B clients. And then if somebody slips down to a C or something like that, and depending on what their attitude's been and how they slip down to C, they might not be a client anymore either. Because there's certain things. It's like, you hire an attorney and you want us to do a good job, but we can't do the good job if you don't provide us with the documentation we need. And that's a huge one. And it's so frustrating. It's like, I want to help you out. I know that we can do a good job, but this is what we need. We need these 4 things. And you said you were going to get that to us, and it's been a month, and we're running up on a deadline. You either need to shit or get off the pot, so to speak. And so if you don't do that, I'm sorry, we got to go in a different direction. And that's kind of hard to tell people. We do have that in our engagement letters. We have external policies that say the same thing. So it's not like, it shouldn't come as a shock to anybody that can read, like, hey, I have to get this over. Plus, it's just common sense. And some people, they get busy, they're professionals, and they just kind of forget. When we follow up a million times and you still don't provide us that, like, we don't really have much of an option. And that kind of sucks, don't get me wrong, because I want to help these people. I want to do a good job. And some of the people, you obviously, you have a better connection with than others. So you're like, well, dude, just get me, just get me this info, and I think we can have a really good shot at this. And if you don't, we got to go in a different direction, like I said. So,
we can only, just like with ours, we can only move at the speed of the client oftentimes. And it's like, look, it's like, I know you've been getting daily reminders on things, and we've been sending weekly emails that you need to do this, and it's been going on for 3 months. Like, hey, as long as the invoice keeps clearing, we'll keep sending follow-ups. But like we are here to help. So, but that's interesting what you said about the rankings of your clients from F to, is A the top? Do you have like an S tier client, or does it just kind of stop at A?
Yeah, we might. That might be like the extra special light price. I don't know. I'm kidding. But no, it's just A through F. It's just the old school grading method that I was used to growing up, but A through F.
So what was kind of the impetus for, I guess, ranking clients like that? Like what had kind of happened as you were growing the practice where you started to kind of assign these gradings, and then when I need to cut the F grades or cut the Ds. What kind of happened there?
So I will be honest, the A through F was not exactly my idea. I was working with like a business coaching company, and one of the things that they had was like, hey, you need to start grading clients, and you need to figure out it's part of figuring out what your ideal client is. And part of that was like, well, grade clients. Like, what's your 100%, this is my absolutely ideal client, and then this is acceptable, and then so on and so forth down to get to F. Obviously, F is like, you don't want to pay, you don't want to provide any documentation, you have a surly attitude, you know everything, and for some reason you're still calling an attorney. That's obviously an F. Nobody has time for that sort of thing, and I don't know why people have that mindset, but that exists sometimes. So that's kind of how I got the impetus to come up with my own grading system. But the idea for it wasn't my idea, but coming up with like what my A, B, C, D, and F is, that was me. So, yeah.
So what do you use as your kind of grading criteria? Like, what separates an A from a B, for example, or a C to D, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so A is, they're pleasant to deal with. They don't have a problem paying. They get me all the information that I need. They keep their appointments. They actually have a good to great case. And they've got, like I said, I think this goes back in the very first part, but they have good personality too. And that stuff matters. Like, if somebody is like 100% like integrated fit with myself and my team, that's what separates them from B. Like B would be more of like, all right, your personality might not be the like 100% fit with everybody, but you're pleasant, you are on time with the phone calls, you keep your appointments, you pay on time, you get the documents and things like that. Like, that's just a slight difference between A and B. And sometimes it's really out of the client's control. And that's why I would accept A or B clients, because, it's not really anybody's fault per se. C is usually you get dropped down to C if you're late on getting us documents, or it's a pain in the butt trying to get you on the schedule, or we call and you're not available, kind of little stuff like that kind of drops you down to a C. And then D is like, they don't pay, or they don't give any information whatsoever in any documents, or they lie. Like, that's a big thing too. Like, you can't lie to any licensed professional that you have. You definitely don't want to lie to your attorney. So, and that was prevalent, probably more so when I was a public defender. I know that's a big shock, but that was pretty prevalent. So I've got over the years, I got a pretty good bullshit meter.
You mean to tell me that when you were doing criminal defense, you had a tendency for people to not be completely and utterly honest with you when you were just assigned to their case?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I did like oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think my whole worldview has just been rocked.
Yeah. I did like the ladies that were accused of like fraud or false pretenses or some sort of like whitish collar crime, embezzlement and stuff like that, because they're typically con artists and they would try to con me. And I'm like, look, I got to the point where like anytime my client would say something to me, I would assume they're lying to me, and I would just kind of go back to what the allegations were in the case and kind of like go back over everything. And then it would kind of be like a trust building exercise to where like, all right, I'm assuming you're lying to me on here. Let's figure this stuff out. And then you kind of get to what their actual truth is and things like that. But with these ladies that were trying to schmooze me and things like that, I thought it was like, I knew that they were lying to me 9 times out of 10, but they did it in such a polite, nice manner that it didn't bother me. Like, oh, okay, that's nice. Because there was always compliments, and I know what you're trying to do. Like, you're trying to, like somehow get me to do a better job. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm going to do the same level of job. But I appreciate that you're being nice to me,
Niceness goes a long way.
Yeah.
So before it leaves my mind, I'm curious on the client grading, because that's something that I don't do internally. Although now I'm thinking I maybe should. Ryan, do you do anything like that?
I don't, but I know other advisors who do, so it's been something I've been curious about.
Yeah, I think I separate a lot of mine into either we do work and they pay on time, or they don't pay on time and we don't do work. So I guess for me right now it's kind of like A and F.
There you go.
I've got to, now I'm sitting here thinking about it now, going I've got a few. I think there's a direct correlation between how far down the scale they'd be and how many times I have to send reminders for, hey, you've missed a couple payments. But so let me ask this. So after you started doing kind of that ranking, what did you kind of do with that information? So, after you've gone in and kind of identified the ideal client and the different people you're working for and assign them grades, what did that for your business? What did that do for you?
I think it freed up a good bit of wasting. It freed up my time because I wasn't wasting it on like chasing clients down for documents or chasing clients down for money, or another one that goes into part of the grading system is hand holding. Like I understand people want updates and I understand they want to know what's going on in their case, and I get that, and we update probably more than most firms if I had to guess. But some people it's like, well, can I get an update? Yeah, it's the same thing I told you the other day. And it's like, it doesn't need to be a 30-minute call, because when I take that 30 minutes out of my day, it's more like 50 minutes because I had to stop what I was doing. And then it's 30 minutes with you. And then it's going to take me about 20 minutes to get back to doing what I was doing, most likely, because I got to go back, refresh my recollection, get back in the mindset of what I was doing. And then boom, especially like if I was doing like, maybe a brief or something like that. I mean, you got to have to kind of change how you were thinking off that last phone call and get back into it. So like that one, those were kind of frustrating. We don't really have many clients that are that insistent on updates that way anymore, but that was something that really factored into it. I think the way that my processes and my systems have changed as I've gotten staff has really changed my grading process as well. Like if somebody doesn't want to go through our normal process, then they're definitely an F. And they're like, we've had somebody, they called and they didn't want to schedule an appointment. It's a free call, so there was not going to be an obligation to pay or anything. They just didn't want to go through that. Then they left us a 1-star review. I've got, as of today, I think I have 96 5-star reviews, and that's the only 1-star review that I have. And it's from somebody that we didn't even represent, and I talked to for like a minute. And I even offered to say, like, look, I don't know what legal documents you're referring to. That might not be an area of law that we practice. And the response is like, well, you're a lawyer, aren't you? I'm like, Yeah, but there's a lot of different lawyers. You might need somebody for a family law situation, or maybe somebody's suing you because you're an idiot and did something stupid. Well, that's not something that we handle. Like, so if you want to send the documents to me, I'll take a look at it. And if it's somebody that, I know somebody that does that area of law and I can't stand them, then I'll refer you over to them. I'm not going to refer somebody like that to somebody I actually like, but I'll find somebody that I don't like and refer them over, refer that person over to them. So that's the only time I've had anybody where it was a one-star review and the person's still on there. Google is being stubborn and won't take it off. But that particular example is something of like, somebody that just doesn't want to go through the normal process of us acquiring the information and seeing if we're even able to help. If we can't help you, I've got a long list of professionals I know that as long as you seem to be a good person and are not going to be really a pain in somebody's ass, we'll be happy to refer you over to them, so.
Yeah, that's such an interesting way to look at it. I didn't expect that to come from that, but it makes so much sense when you think of the time savings that comes from simply, picking clients that are a better fit into your process and not trying to wrangle, sort of the 80-20 rule, right? Where
right.
you're spending
Exactly.
80% of your time on the 20% of people who are not a great fit. And it sort of reminds me of something I'm working towards in my practice as well. Like, so I typically meet with advisory clients on a quarterly basis, and we can meet more often than that if they have the need, but generally we'll do quarterly review updates because that gives us essentially enough time for life changes to play out in the meantime, but not too long where we don't have to like totally restart every time we meet. But what you were saying kind of brought it up in my head of like, I'm not sure how it might work in your practice, but is that, are you able to sort of batch client meetings like that into certain days, or does the practice of law sort of like, you have to meet with somebody on a certain time or a day, and all of that in the sense of like trying to save time and be efficient with client work, if I'm explaining that?
No, I got you. So we can't do like a quarterly meeting or anything like that with the clients, especially in my area of law, because our goal is to resolve the situation as soon as possible. A lot of times that's out of our control, so things will kind of pop up like, hey, this investigator just contacted me, even though you sent a letter of representation over, you have a minute to discuss what the conversation was like. Yeah, hopefully you didn't say anything to him and you reiterated to him that you represent it. So things will pop up, and we if it's an emergency or something, then I will call them as soon as I possibly can. Otherwise, there's a spot on the calendar usually within a day or two, maybe 3 at the most, where either where I'll be able to talk to you directly, or if you need to talk to somebody sooner, we got staff members that can kind of reach out and go like, hey, just gather information, and then, or both, like we can, hey, reach out to them right away, get the information, set up a call with them, and I'll talk with them as soon as I possibly can. So I wish I could do kind of like what you're talking about, Ryan, with the batch calling. I think that would be great, but the nature of the beast for what we do, not really possible. Now, we do keep up to date. Like, we have like systems in place to where every X amount of days, the clients will get an email like updating, like I think it's every 60 days if I remember correctly, and 45 to 60 days. So if nothing has gone on in their case, we still send them an update and say like, hey, we hadn't forgot about you. There's no update for the case right now. And people typically appreciate it. Every once in a while we'll get an email back. It's like, like, hey, what's taking these people so long? Like, I get it, man. And then we'll get the follow-up email. Hey, I wasn't trying to be mean to y'all. I'm just frustrated with the board. Like, again, totally get it. No problem.
Yeah. And from that perspective too, like when people are coming in for, emergency like situations where they're trying to defend their professional license, like for you, it seems to me like you'd have to be super efficient with your client onboarding and essentially like your triage of a situation. So just in my personal, in my practice, I bet there's a lot I could learn from your onboarding.
For clients. I mean, our onboarding process is we've got it touches multiple hands, but everybody has clear understanding of what their obligations are. So I do have an assistant that handles the sending out the engagement letters, and then he's part of his job is like document wrangling, like I was alluding to earlier. So we can have, the first step would be the appointment schedule, and then the other assistant and client services is their email. They start the process of getting the documentation so our associate Michael can have the information when they have their consultation, and then he's more aware of what the actual situation is. And then if it's kind of a short time frame, he'll let me know. He'll say like, hey, we got this potential client, they've got a short turnaround. Is this something that we could probably do? And I'll look at everybody's calendar and go, all right, we can squeeze this in. We can help them out. And then if it's a situation where we just have to send a request for a hearing, it's super simple, and we've got staff members that handle that. That gets kicked over, and then some of the stuff is actually auto-generated, and then there's supervision over it by staff members, to make sure that the document that's generated is correct. So it gets double checked, and then it gets sent out by the staff member. So there's some checks and balances, there's some automation, there's responsibilities for the systems and things like that. So it is, it's not a short process, but it's one that I've kind of worked on for a while, that we've had it in the policies and procedures for a while. The one thing that I'm probably the worst at is not going back and tinkering enough with my policies and procedures and updating them or adding to them. I think the last time I added to my policy and procedures maybe February of this year, but I need to get better about that. I need to do it at least every quarter, just to make sure that I need to add stuff and things like that.
Yeah, so you're coming up here on about 6 years in business. So over the last 6 years, how has your view on how a law practice needs to actually operate kind of evolved from the beginning when you first got started and the preconceived notions you had at that point to the point now where you have people working for you and it's become a actual practice, not just you? How has your view of the business and the things you've learned, how's that changed over the last few years?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. And when I first started off, I did the same thing that everybody else does when they're practicing law. It's like, well, I have to schedule these hour-long consultations or 30 minutes or whatever the case may be, and I have to charge X amount of money. I think I was charging like $200 for $250 for an hour consultation, something like that. And it would just be like, for lack of a better phrasing, it's like, well, let me show this potential client how smart I am, because that's what they want to hear and that's how they're going to hire me. And that's just not really the case in all reality. So I realized, and I learned again from others, is you got to treat it as basically a sales call. Hey, I need to learn what your problem is, and I need to learn, what your situation is, what you're having a hard time with. So I can tell you, not get into the minutia of how I'm going to solve your problem, but let you know, all right, that's something that we can handle. Here's what we're going to, here's what we can do. Here's what it's going to cost. Here's, kind of like the next step, kind of things like that. So it's more about the client and getting information from the client versus telling the client how smart you think you are. And, again, I learned that from somebody else, because the only sales experience I had was waiting tables, bartending, and bussing tables. So
honestly, probably not wasted time at all. That's
no, it wasn't. I tell you what, man, it was good experience in retrospect, just dealing with the public, and then it is sales. At the end of the day, you're trying to upsell things when you come up, especially if you're waiting tables. It was funny because I was having dinner with my wife over the weekend, and the waitress pulled an upsell move, and I wasn't even mad. I was like, you know what? All right, cool. I'll go with that. I was like, I know you're upselling me, but that's fine. You did a great job on it, so.
It really is wild how kind of the core of services, everything you have basically just described, I think we even talked about on the podcast of that initial, how you view in the beginning what you're going to talk about and the things you do,
Hmm.
how that evolves as you do more and you kind of really realize what customers give a shit about.
Yep.
Where, because in the beginning I remember the same thing of like I'm really good at this stuff and that's what I focused on was technical skills and blah 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 and all that,
Yep.
and it took me quite a while to really realize, probably because I don't pay attention enough to what other people in the competition are doing, but long enough to realize that ultimately at its core all the clients really care about is their problems going away.
Right.
And that's it. Like that is the core fundamental is make my life easier and everything will be great. And it took me a while to really realize that. And it's just interesting how profession to profession, the CPA services, financial advisory services, legal services, where it all kind of follows the same thing, where it's the same core. It's always interesting to kind of hear that from other professionals that really we're all kind of going through the same stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's like stay with the client's problem because that's what they called, right? So yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Like just stay with the problem. Make sure you understand the problem, clarify to make sure that they know that you understand what the problem is, and then figure out a way to allow them to help you solve the problem, right? And then that is, all right, this is what we can do, we can take care of it. Here's the price, get this signed so we can go ahead and get started. And if somebody's on a deadline, that's something where they really need to understand, like, you can't dilly dally. Like, we need to do this like now. So we're not under the gun of trying to squeeze this under a tight deadline. I would say we do a lot of stuff with daycare facilities, and like I would never want to own a daycare facility, and so happy for the people that do run them because it's so needed. And my kid's been in daycare. Both my kids have been in daycare. I still got one that's in there. They do a great job, but there's so many regulations on there, and I get that you're dealing with kids. So the fear is if you don't have regulations, the sky's going to fall and everybody's going to die, right? But so with the daycare, they are under so many regulations that sometimes they get something from the state and they just, oh, well, I'll take care of this. It's like, and then they kind of like think back, like, didn't I get something from the state? And then it's like, oh crap, my deadline's coming up in 5 days or 4 days. And it's like, all right. I mean, so yeah, it gets a little stressful. And those are the type of things where we have to kind of scramble around and be like, all right, like, we got to get ready as soon as a person signs up. Or sometimes, I don't do this very often because it is a business, but I also am in the business of helping people. So if somebody is on a tight deadline, I will trust them. And I will say, look, I will file this, but if you don't pay me after I file this just to meet the deadline, I will withdraw. And thankfully you put the trust in people, and sometimes they surprise you and they actually do follow it through, which is quite nice.
Yeah, trust is always, particularly when you're in business, is a commodity that's usually in short supply. Because I think a lot of times it has a tendency to very much devolve into I trust no one. I know by nature I tend to be a whole lot more cynical, or I know you do as well. Although we were financial auditors, and Nick, you were a public defender, so I think all of us probably have a healthy distrust of quite literally everybody that exists. It's one of those where I'm always fond of saying, well, they seem nice. I don't know what they do in their house in the evening or what they're doing, but it seems never going to be one of those where you're on the 5 o'clock news and it go, oh yeah, your neighbor down the street just blew up a school, and it was like, well, they were such a nice person, I couldn't imagine that. Anyone is capable of some horrific shit. So let me ask you this. What's kind of your, we've kind of talked the beginning, what you've kind of learned through starting the business, where you've come from, and how your process and things have developed. What's kind of your thoughts on what you want to do next? So, is your goal to be like a large regional? Do you want to stay relatively small, have a handful of people? Are you looking for, I want to go recreate the largest firms? What's, the acquisition, getting competition? So what's kind of your thoughts and goals there?
So I want to grow and expand still, but not to the level of some of these national firms. And I want to do it and expand in a way that we're still going to be able to offer the same kind of client service we always have offered. So I mean, that's always been number one to me. And I think that like as I got older, I realized what really good customer service is and how as a company grows, the first thing that usually falls off a cliff is customer service. It's like, and I think that competition really drives the need for providing good customer service. And that's more on like the huge corporate end. But what I've seen is like products and services, like if it's a client-based business like ours, like if a business gets to a certain tipping point, they usually will say go one or two ways. They're like, all right, well, screw the customer service so much. We're just in it to make money. Or they're in, nah, we still want to keep the customer service and we'll have money be still number two and we're still going to grow. And that's usually the ones that grow a little bit slower, I have noticed at least. I want to be more of like, hey, we'll grow, but we want to keep that customer service because the customer service first and then everything else will follow behind it. And, it's just kind of, that's one of those things where I've just noticed over the years what that really looks like. And I think that the biggest thing to me is like, I've always tried to eat pretty well, but it's not like, it's not easy because every time you find like a food product that you like that is actually healthy for you, they get bought out by somebody and then they start putting a bunch of crap in their food. And then you're like, why does this taste different? And why do I have, like 6 toes now, So that's kind of like one of the things that I've noticed over the years as an example of that, so I want to keep my customer service as high as possible, and then everything will kind of go from there as you grow. But I do want to keep growing and expanding. I don't think, the national thing is not really in the cards for me. Like I'm licensed in 2 other states, Florida and Mississippi, but they're not border states. So it's not really an option for me to expand into a border state unless I take the bar exam again, which I really don't want to do. So
I can't imagine why you wouldn't want to take the bar exam again. Ryan, do you want to
Yeah.
take the CPA exam again?
Let's go. See if I can pass them all on the first time again.
Oh, and quick disclaimer on that. I am on inactive status in Mississippi and Florida because I don't have a use for it. Just in case the bar is listening.
I know. I'm sure the SEC is listening because Ryan being registered and all that. I think they listen to all the content we put out. So, when we get the email from the Mississippi bar, I would take that as a compliment. They say, "Hey, he said, like, you know what? We're just flattered you were listening in the first
Right.
place. I don't know how the fuck, but we're just happy that you followed up on us." So, when you have seen other law firms grow, what do you think is going to be the key to maintaining that quality of service and that kind of client focused approach of maintaining that as things continue to grow and develop? Or another way of phrasing it, what do you think the other firms are screwing up, the mistakes that they are making on why their quality has tanked as they have grown?
I think it's probably twofold that go hand in hand with one another. They probably don't have clear-cut policies and procedures. And then I think the other thing that goes with that is having the right staff to follow those policies and procedures. Like my staff, I am big on culture. And, I've had staff members that weren't a good culture fit that kind of slipped through the cracks of my interview process, which I ended up having to change over the years and they had to go. So I think it's kind of both of those things and they both go hand in hand. Like, cause you can have the best policy and procedures in the world, but if you don't have the right people doing them, then, what's the point?
When you got that line item that says, consider these other factors, and whoever you've got running through the checklist reads that and goes, I don't even know what those are. It doesn't really matter how well written out your policies and procedures are if you got people who don't know what they're doing, which I think a lot of times, in our field, I think a lot of large firms start to sacrifice on a lot of training. I think we've seen a lot of times. I spend an ungodly amount of time every week kind of working on training my guys so that they know, here's the things we have to do, here's what's important and all that. And it's interesting how really as soon as you get into a service-based thing, it ends up being it's funny how, Ryan, we've talked a lot about the core fundamentals of business, kind of regardless of what you do, it's all in there. And it still is here where it's training and process, and regardless of kind of what your business is, you still have to kind of adhere to that. Otherwise, you run into a ton of problems, and then everybody goes, why is your product so shit? And then your Google reviews start to tank, and nobody's happy, and you're like, wait a minute, everything was going great. It's just interesting, the parallels across industries.
Yep.
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 Well,
And Nick,
and I
forgive me
also-
if you mentioned this already, but how many people are on your team currently?
So it's myself. I've got 2 litigation attorneys, 2 paralegals, an attorney that handles all of our discovery calls, and then 2 administrative staff members that handle onboarding clients, offboarding clients, and kind of the other administrator is kind of a wild card, like a lot of different stuff that I need her to do. She can figure it out and get it done, and she's fantastic. So yeah.
Nice. And yeah, just out of curiosity on that, because I think Connor, you and I were talking about this maybe yesterday in our recording, but Nick, are you in your process, I guess, like with your attorneys on the team, are you the final review on work that happens? Like, do you look at everything that goes through, or are those attorneys able to sort of work, not in a silo, but, by themselves and make decisions? Or how does that process work? And just, I'm asking because we were talking about this to, sort of like we hit at earlier, like free yourself up for time and make things more efficient.
Yeah, that's a really good question as well, because if you're hiring somebody else to do it, but you're constantly doing it, then again, like, what's the point? So yeah, I get where you're coming from. So one of my attorneys is supervising the other attorney. She's got more experience. He's about to hit coming up on 1 year of practicing law. He's a sharp guy though. So with him, if it's a board that I'm more familiar with, then I'm going to step into kind of like the leadership overseeing role. But as he has been able to handle certain things by himself, then he will handle those. And we go over cases. We go over every single case once a month. And that's our long open cases review. And then the goal for the rest of the weeks is like a short new cases that are opened up, and we touch on like, you got this is the next step. What are we going to be doing after that? Kind of things like that. There might be some weeks where we don't hit all the new cases just because there might only been like 2 or 3 that popped up. Most of the time we'll have more than 2 or 3, at least if it's a good week, we have more than 2 or 3, you know what I mean? So that's how we've been doing a lot of the overseeing, in addition to, the supervising attorney that's supervising the other attorney. But at the end of the day, it's my responsibility. So if something does pop up or somebody has a question, I'm available, and I'll review or consult with them about X, Y, or Z. So
Interesting. So I know we're pushing good on time. I think when we initially talked, we wanted to get at least a half an hour, and I think if we keep asking questions, we'll be going in excess of an hour because we like to talk. So I do want to end it with kind of this: what over the last 6 years, as you've built North State Law into a successful practice, what is you could either take it from your advice to other attorneys that want to start their own practices or other individuals that want to start their own businesses. What is in your mind, the most important learning lesson that you have picked up over the time you've spent growing North State Law? If you had to boil everything down into a takeaway or 2 takeaways, what to you at least would be those takeaways?
I probably say make sure that you are as competent in marketing and sales as you are in the actual work that you're going to be doing, right? So like if you're a financial advisor or CPA or an attorney, like you already know how to do the work. work on being as competent as a marketer and a salesperson as you are in the actual profession that you chose. Right. Yep.
Well, I'm gonna have to take your advice here because I don't even think I'm at that point yet. Feel like I
But
just
it's
got called
always,
out.
I mean, and it's always going to be a strive to get to that level. If you don't get there, that's fine. But you constantly working on stuff. Like I'm having to go back and work more and more on marketing because I've slipped a little bit off of that, and I'm not getting enough marketing channel. So I'm still having to kind of, and I'm always going to try to learn new stuff with marketing and new stuff with sales and things like that, just to kind of keep up. So.
It's irritating how it's a constantly evolving battle. I mean, I know Ryan, I know you're struggling with it as well. I'm struggling with it. You know, they throw in changes with AI and all that stuff. It's amazing how many, you know, when I talk to other clients, most of their problems basically boil down into we can't cut costs anymore. We need more revenue, which means you've got a sales and marketing problem. It really is wild how so much of it kind of devolves into that.
Yeah.
Ryan, you have final questions or final takeaways you want to do? I'll let you do the outro on this one since I didn't get to ask you how you were doing today in the beginning.
I'm a little salty about that, but it's okay. But no, man, thanks, Nick. I really appreciate your time. This was super, super informative and really, honestly, kind of validating, I think, of our previous episodes because Connor, I think
Cool.
so much of what you and I have talked about, like Nick, you have reinforced today. Like we've hit so many good areas between sales, marketing, and business ownership versus, you know, doing the actual client work and, and what you signed up to do when you started the business. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's nice to hear, and hopefully I think it'll be helpful for the listeners too to hear that. And like you said earlier in the episode, Connor, you know, hear it from a third party, not just me and you all the time. But
Yeah, it is nice to know that we aren't just an echo chamber.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate you guys having me on, man. I enjoyed it. This was quite fun. So hopefully the listeners kind of learned a good bit, as much as I could possibly teach anybody. But yeah.
Yeah, and so that's for everyone. That is Nick Dogle with North State Law, a law firm in Raleigh, North Carolina. So definitely make sure to check him out. And he also does have a YouTube channel where he
Yep.
also posts informational content for really anyone that's got professional licenses, whether you're GC, nurse, doctor, CPA, insurance agent, realtor, any of that stuff. Even if you're not in North Carolina, I'm sure there's still a bunch of really good information in there because a lot of times a lot of the fundamentals remain the same. So, you know, make sure to check out North State Law on YouTube. You know, like, comment, subscribe on all his stuff. Show him some care there. And Ryan, you got a parting thing for us here?
oh man, I think I am good to go.
Alrighty, well then with that, we will, as always, we appreciate everyone that has made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube, or if you're on Spotify, please give it a like and leave some comments. If there's any other additional questions or things, leave comments so we can pass those to Nick, and we will see everybody on the next episode. See you then.
Thanks, guys.